So good evening, everybody. And as you heard the song, as it kind of opened up, it says, if you want to meet the right one, you have to be the right one. So we're going to talk a little bit about attraction this afternoon or this evening. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be in this series called Love Song, and it's really Song of Solomon's. It's really, and if you're in your Bible, it may say Song of Songs, it may say a couple other things, but really it's Song of Solomon, and we're really going to talk about. It's got this. A lot of people don't realize that this section of the Bible, this Old Testament section, it's as you read through it, it's kind of dirty. I mean, like where you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is in the Bible? Does this really say this in here? It makes you blush. It makes you get into it. You're like, oh my. And if you've heard a lot of people reading this book called what is it, 50 Shades of Grey or something like that. It compares to that. That's how this book is, and it really is one of these things that you can look at and go, man, I can see where people get these ideas out of this book. Anyway, so we're going to talk about this. It really helps us understand Christ's love for the church, but more importantly, it really helps us understand what a husband and wife's love is supposed to look like. What is it supposed to come together and look like? As we do relationships and as we do things with one another, we really don't have this clear understanding or biblical understanding of what we're supposed to do. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to learn about it. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about a godly way of pursuing your spouse. Sometimes we don't understand what it really means to pursue our spouse. We think we see it. We go, oh, she's hot or he's hot or whatever it is, and we chase after that. And that's not necessarily what we're supposed to be doing. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the thing that most people don't, they go, oh, we can't talk about that in church. We're going to talk about sex in 2 weeks. And then the other thing we're going to talk about is a godly way of solving conflict in your relationships, because there's always going to be conflict. And whether that's a relationship that you have with a friend or your relationship with your spouse, all of them have conflict. It's just kind of part of being in a relationship. Today, like I said, is attraction. One of the things that's kind of part of attraction is, I don't know if you guys know this, but 4 out of every 10 relationships started today are started online. They started at, where it's Match.com or it's eHarmony, and I don't know all the other ones. Christian Mingle, I see that commercial all the time. So, these are the 3 I see commercials for all the time. But, and for me, I'm a curious person, so I went and did some profile, what do they call that? You guys do it a lot on Facebook. It's called stalking. You just kind of look at it and, well, everybody has done it. Everybody's looked at it and said, oh, I hear that people go, no, I've never done that. People have done it, I promise you. We'll give you some things, some help to look at what it means, what they put on their profile. It says, if she puts on her profile and it says that she's 40-ish, that means that she is 49 and a half. That's what it means. If he puts that he's 40-ish, that means that he's 55 looking for a 25-year-old. You guys are tough tonight, I'll tell you that. It's just, if he puts that he's huggable, that means that he's heavy. He's 25 pounds overweight, and he's got enough hair on him to be compared to Bigfoot or Sasquatch or something. She's romantic. That means she looks better by candlelight. And it's really kind of he's laid back and very close to family. That means that he's unemployed and lives in his parents' basement. She's bubbly and fun. If she puts that on her profile, that means that she probably never shuts up. That's probably what that means. If you hear independent women, you go, oh, I'm an independent woman. You have control issues, you'll dominate you, and you'll like it. That's just how it is. And the last one I put down here, it says, he's average looking. Because a lot of guys, they go, oh, I'm just average looking. And what that really means is that you fell from the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. That's really what that means. It means it's just like ding, 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 back and forth all the way down. There's 4 qualities that we really are supposed to be looking for. So as we've gone through and we've done profile trolling, there's really other qualities that we need to be looking for. One of the big things that we really, really need to be spending and looking for people's profiles, and whether it's in person or whether you see it online or whatever it is, you need to be looking for godly character. That's the first one. You have to be looking for godly character. And a lot of times we don't understand what godly character is. We look at this and go, what does that even mean? And the Bible really helps us understand that. In this Song of Solomon, it's a conversation that's happening between a woman and a man. And you see this, and it opens up and it says, she, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. And this is where it gets important. It says, your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. Now, and I want to stop here for a second, and it says the reason why it's underlined is because this is the important part of this verse. It says, your name is like perfume. Now, I want you to remember, there's an opportunity that if you read through Luke, if you read through any of the New Testament, you start seeing, there's an opportunity where Mary comes in and she pours the wine out, she breaks it over his feet, and she starts to wash his feet with her hair and the perfume. And so you see this, and you read about this, and they come in and they go, why would you do that? That's worth a year's wages. What are you doing? This is how important perfume is back then. This happens 1,000 years later. Song of Solomon was written in 965 BC, or right around there. And 1,000 years later, they're coming out and say that's a year's wages. Imagine how important it was 1,000 years prior. You know, and so you start seeing this, and you go, well, your name is like perfume being poured out. And so that means he has to have a good name. It has to be something that's an amazing name. And remember back then is that purified oil is very important because people back then didn't bathe. They didn't take showers like we do on a regular basis. You know, even if you talk to somebody now and they go, they only shower once a week, you go, man, that's nasty. Well, back then they showered maybe once a month, maybe sometimes once a year. There were some people that were funky. They would be walking around, they just stink. And so what you're sitting there like, no, they didn't shower once a year. Yes, they showered once a year. You know, what you guys don't understand is that bouquet. You guys have ever seen it? You go to a wedding and the bride is carrying this bouquet. There's a reason why they have that. Because way back when, that was to cover up the funk. It was to cover up the smell. Because they just didn't bathe like we do now. It wasn't a priority. And so what she really comes out and she's talking about here, she's going, your name is that important. It's valuable. It wasn't about how many baths he was taking. It was really about the reputation that he had. It was about the character that he displayed. You guys know reputation and character. The reputation is what other people say about you. Your character is what is really about you. It's really that integrity. It's who you really are when people aren't looking. So she comes out and says, your name is that good. No wonder why women love you is because you have that. It's not because you're a hottie. It's not because you're this perfect person. It's because you have this good name. You have godly character. You're doing what God has asked you to do. It's an important thing that we really clarify and look at this and go, what sort of character do you have? Where is our character? When you start looking at it, do you go, I have a godly character? No. Do people talk about, when I'm not around, do all the young women walk around and go, oh my gosh, he's got such a good name? You know, they don't do that. They just don't. That means that my name really isn't that good. You know, where is it that we have to find that? Where do we go and start going? Where do we start changing this? And where did our culture shift to where that's not even an important thing anymore? Some of us would go, oh, I've always attracted the wrong type. Attracted the wrong type of people. And sometimes we have to remember the bait that we're using, right? We have to look at this and go, I've attracted the wrong type of people all of my life. And we start going, well, what type of bait have you been using? Where do you meet these people at? Where do it's like, you're out at the bars and my back hurts, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you're like out there twerking, you're doing your thing. And you're trying to get into a little groove while you're at the club. And what happens? Somebody comes up behind you and be like, hey, can I dance with you? And you're all bumping and grinding. What sort of relationship do you think is going to happen out of that? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? You're going to go home and all of a sudden it's going to be that Cinderella thing where they lived happily ever after. No. He's there for one thing. And I know that, and I was throwing in my face second service where they go, well, you met your wife in a bar. I worked at the bar. I worked there. It was my job. It wasn't like one of those things where I go, I'm just going to go kick it and meet somebody here. No. It happened, but it's not. What I'm saying is what sort of bait are you putting out there? What have you put out there that said, hey, I want this? Marriage is not so much about finding the right person. It's not so much about finding the right person as becoming the right person. A lot of times, you will find the person you belong with when you become the person you are supposed to be. And we don't realize it a lot of times. We go, no. When you become the person you're supposed to be, you will find the right person. Become the person you are looking for is looking for. Become the person you are looking for is looking for. It's really, Andy Stanley comes out and says that. And it sounds wrong, and it sounds like it's wrong. But it's right. You should be, become the person that your significant other is going to be looking for. That's what it really has to be. The other thing is that when you get to this point where we start growing trust, in really today's world, we have lost trust. We need to start growing trust. We need to start putting this back into, you hear it all the time. You hear people come up and you hear, men will say, oh, you can't trust any women, or you'll hear men say, or women say, all men are dogs, and it's really, you just hear these things and we go, we need to start putting that away, and we need to start growing trust, and we need to start having some, maybe start showing some of those insecurities that we have, those things that we go, I need to hide this, or I need to put this, I can't let anybody know about it. I used it in first and second service. I talked about, you guys ever notice how loyal a dog really is? As a guy, we should be honored to be called a dog. We really should. Dogs, a lot of people don't understand this, is that, as dog owners, we look at it and go, they're our thing for like 15 minutes every day. We come home from work, and they're excited to see us. We take them for the walk. We do all those things. Well, that dog has been waiting for you all day to get home. You are everything to that dog. That's what you are. You're everything to that dog. That dog's been like sitting there going, oh, I can't wait until you get home. And when you give them attention, and you take care of them, and you give them treats, and you train them right, what do? They're like angels. They'll do, they'll stay, and you walk away. What do? They stay there. And sometimes you have to deal with some issues with the dog, right? You get a dog, it won't get off the bed. Sometimes it craps on the carpet. Well, this is what guys do. It's like everything is the same thing. We're super loyal. I mean, we don't crap on the carpet usually, but we do all of those same things. We do that type of relationship. Andrew, there's no crap up here on the carpet. You don't have to be looking for it up here. It's okay. But that's really how it is. Is that guys, it should be like a statement of honor. You should take it. Some women walk around and they use that B word and they go, hey, yep, that's me. That's not a statement of honor. But as a guy, we should look at it and go, that's a statement of honor. And really in the Bible, she says, dark I am, or dark am I, yet lovely. Daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, the tent curtains of Solomon. And really, this is kind of the hard part to understand this, is that back then, is that it wasn't one of those things, and even though everybody's got this olive complexion back then, it's not one of these, there's different classes of people. If you were darker, that means that your family and your background came from working in the fields. That means that you were almost a second class type of person, where if you were lighter, that means that your parents and your grandparents and them spent time indoors, and they wanted to be, you wanted to be a lighter complexion. And there's certain, if you go to certain countries now, it's the same exact thing. Last year, Aubrey and I went to the Philippines, and I tan really well, right? So I get, and I get dark, but my daughter doesn't. My daughter is like, she's like allergic to sun or something like that. And so when we're over there, everybody wanted to take pictures with her. They all wanted to take pictures of how she, what she was wearing, because how light she was, how empty her complexion is sometimes. It was just like ghost white. They want to get there. If you talk to people over there, they'll be using whitening soaps. They try and get as, and it's like, this is exactly what's happening back in this time. At 965 BC, they wanted to be as white as they could, or as light as they could. And so what were they doing? How could they get there? Well, they would, they didn't want to work in the fields. And this is exactly what's happening with her. She says, don't stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. She goes, I'm sunburned. Don't look at me like that. And she comes out and even says, my mother's sons were angry with me. She doesn't even call them her brothers. She goes, my mother's sons were angry with me, and they made me go take care of the vineyards. And this is where she goes, my own vineyard I had to neglect. And her own vineyard, she's referring to her body. That's what she's looking at. She's going, this is me. This is my body. I had to neglect my body in order to go take care of the vineyards for my family. Don't stare at me. I'm sunburned. She hadn't taken care of her skin. She didn't remember to put on that SPF 50 back then and go out there and start taking care of her skin. She didn't remember to do that. She worked out in the fields, got all burnt up. But he comes out, and as we go through this, you're going to see how he slowly takes care of those insecurities. He slowly comes out, he goes, I don't care about that stuff. Watch as he loves anyway. And he comes through and he goes, those physical insecurities, it doesn't matter to me. We all have physical insecurities though, don't we? Each one of us in here. Some of us, we get up in the mirror, and we look and we go, man, I don't like my nose. I don't like it. Now, that's not really me. I mean, I get up in the morning and I look at myself and I go, take it or leave it, that's me. But a lot of people, they have these things that get in the mirror, and I heard the conversation. I've heard, I knew a girl who was a size 2, and she goes, I got to lose weight. To become what? A toothpick? I mean, is that what you're trying to do? Is that you want to be a 0 and you want to be able to wear a toothpick? What were you trying to do? And if that's your thing, there's sometimes that you're not fat at that point. It's just not the deal. And And then sometimes we look at, I need to lose weight, or I need to become skinny, or I got this going on. We all have different things. One eye is a little more over to this side than the other eye. This foot is bigger than that foot. Some of us, and by the way, one side of your body is always bigger than the other side. It's just kind of, your body works that way for some reason. But, you guys know me. I hate my toes. Hate them. Hate my toes. It's like a big complex. I look down at my feet and I go, oh, God, why'd you bless me with these things? It's weird sometimes. You look, and I got one that's like bigger than the other one, and my mom used to tell me that's a sign of royalty. And I go, that's not a sign of royalty. That's a sign of me like pulling it off and and it grew that way. We all have these things that kind of make us insecure. So I've always walked around. I didn't start wearing flip-flops and sandals until like 5 years ago, because I was like, and I really got to the point where my wife's not going anywhere, so I can wear flip-flops. I don't know. But that's how it is. Some of you guys, the insecurity is you'll never trust a man or you'll never trust a woman because you're like, I don't want them to be able to say this or break me down or bring me to this different point. We need to be able to start changing that. We need to start growing in trust. The other thing is that we need to start having higher standards. A lot of times we don't have very high standards. We've kind of lost the sense of what standards really are almost. We've kind of broken down. We said, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And then she says, tell me, you whom I love, where your gaze fall, where you gaze your flock, where you rest your sheep at midday. Why should I be like the veiled women besides the flocks of your friends? It's Songs 1:7. Veiled women back then, they were prostitutes. So when you hear this, and they were in Egypt, veiled women were prostitutes. And so you hear this, and you start looking at this, and she's going, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be part of this. I'm not going to be part of your shenanigans. She goes, I have higher standards. I'm not going to follow along with these things. Is that what we do, though? In this day and age, we don't do this. We get our buddies get together. They go, hey, let's go out and let's go do this. Let's go to the strip club. And we go, no, we don't stay now. All right, let me go get the car. I got a shotgun. That's what happens. That's the line that you hear. And they go jump in the car and they go do these things. Let's go to the club. We get it. Instead of going, no, I have higher standards. I'm not going to this. No. Instead, we get in the car and we do it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing when it comes to sex. We sin together here. That's what happens over and over and over again. Instead of going off and doing what God has asked us to do, we end up sinning together. The thing I can tell you is that if you've been in a relationship in here before and you've had sex before, you can remember the first person you ever had sex with. You can even think about it. You can remember details that you don't even want to remember. You can remember all about it. That should be an experience that you share with the person that you are married to. It shouldn't be one of these things that you share with just everybody. It should be to have a memory that's that vivid, to have something that you can recall just like that. That should be something that you want to share with the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And so often that's not the case. So often it's like the 16th person that you're in you're like going, well, who was number 14 and who was 12 and all these different things. You can't even remember sometimes what happened in between one and the person you married. These are things that we have to really take the step back and start going, am I holding myself to a higher standard as well as the people that I'm with? And a lot of times we're not. A lot of times we don't think we can do any better. Instead, we sin together instead of trying to live a God-honoring life together. We've just gotten to this point where we just sin and sin and sin. We got to this point where it's just business as usual. Our whole culture has made this, it's business as usual. We've gotten from treating our relationships as gifts to treating them as possessions, and it's just gotten to this point where our culture is lost because of it. It's really sad. It's sad that it's gotten to this point. The other thing that we have to get to this point, and you don't hear it in relationships often enough, is consistent encouragement. You just don't hear the encouragement and the consistency that you need to have in these relationships. He says, I liken you, my darling, to a mare among the Pharaoh's chariot horses. And I know that you hear this and he just called her a horse. And that's not really he did call her a horse. He said, I liken you to the horse. But that's not really what he's talking about here. These adult female horses, and it kind of needs some explanation, but they're a white horse, and they pulled the chariot of the Pharaoh back then. That's really what they were most esteemed of all the animals back then. They were a prized animal, and the big thing was they were related to a deity. They were like almost godlike, So when people saw them, they go, a lot of things were compared to this, and so that's the reason why this is a big, flattering, encouraging compliment that comes out here. And he goes, I compare you to the mares among the Pharaoh's horses. It really comes out, it's just, you have to see this, and a lot of times we don't even get that. You think your skin is burned? You are gorgeous to me, is really what he replies. I love you. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about what you have going on. You are everything I want. That's what he's really telling her. He goes, you are everything I want. I'd rather live with you in a tent than be in a mansion with you, or without you. It's really what the thing is. I'd rather live in tents with you than live in a mansion without you. Kind of an encouraging statement sometimes that we've kind of missed the point here with. You know, instead of growing closer, instead of kind of getting away, they got to this point where instead of doing what God has asked them to do, or instead of going away from what God has asked them to do, they've come together and have gotten to security with one another. They've said, well, let's offer encouragement to one another. Let's help build each other up. Let's do life together. Well, that's gone now. You know, most relationships now end in divorce. And the reason why they end in divorce, the number one argument all the time is money. It's always what it is. It's always money. That's the number one reason. Money is this big dividing factor. You know, and I will tell you is that when most relationships started and there was no money. And that's how you built this love and you built this trust, and all of a sudden money came in, whether it could be a $30,000 a year, $50,000, $100,000 a year job, but this money became this entangling thing, and it became about possessions. It became about what we have, with the car, the house, whatever it is. If you remember when your relationship started, and probably when it was at its best a lot of times, you had nothing. There was nothing there except for the two of you and probably God, where you were helping you get together and go, hey, let's start doing life together. Where all the possessions and the money got in the way of doing what God really asked you to do. And then the encouragement went away because you go, you're spending money. Well, instead of going, I love you, how can we go out and do this? How can we make this better? How can we do life together this way? How can we change these things? A lot of times, we've allowed it to become a dividing factor. Argument after argument is started over that. He says, beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes are doves. How handsome you are, my beloved. Now, I know he says handsome, but handsome is really both ways. It's not just a men's statement. But he's really talking about character and trust. Because really what's happening is character and trust is a big thing, and the physical is last. Where in your relationships has it gone from being, did you start looking at somebody's character? Did you start trusting them? And then you had this physical bond with them, or was it the complete opposite direction? You started physically, and then you tried to figure out what sort of character they were, and then you figured out if you could trust them or not. Because a lot of times, if you find somebody who's got this godly character, you find that you can trust them a lot sooner, and then the physical is kind of negotiable. You know, people can be with somebody who's got this great character and is trustworthy, and they can be ugly. I mean, that's just what the reality is. You can find beauty in the other two statements. You can find beauty where you can go, I can see past. You see these relationships. You see how people are at this time. And you just got to start looking at it and going, character and trust are way more important than the physical is the last thing. Guys, the reality is if you treat her well, you will get better looking over time. That's just what happens. The better you treat her, the better looking you become. And a lot of times we don't look at it that way. We don't look at it and go, oh, no. And instead we end up treating women horribly. You know, you're going to love me. Go do the dishes. I don't know any woman who's going to go, yeah, I love doing dishes and I'll love you more after I'm done. That's just not how it works. I mean, if you go instead of go do the dishes, baby, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go take care of the dishes. Those are ways that we can help support. You know, it doesn't mean that you're going to become her slave, but there is ways that you can support. Baby, I understand you cooked dinner for me tonight. I'm going to go do the dishes. You know, and sometimes we miss that whole point. What happens, the result? What comes out of this? You know, if you look at the first chapter, it's really about her insecurities, and he comes up out of her insecurities and goes, look, we can fix some of these things. And the second chapter really leads into this trust and this character building. And he goes, she feels special. She really comes out of this, and it says, I am a rose, a Sharon of a lily in the valleys. And he says, like a lily among the thorns, my darling among the young women. She goes, I'm a rose, a singular statement. It's not one of these things where it's multiple. You're not a bouquet of roses. You're not any of that stuff. You are a singular rose. It's the most special woman on earth. This is how she feels. She steps away from this. She goes, I feel this. I am a rose amongst all the roses. And a lot of times we don't make our significant other feel that way. You can just look at them and talk to them and go, do you feel like a rose amongst other roses when you're with me? And a lot of times that statement is, no. Guys, remember, this is a two-way street. It goes both ways. Don't think that the guy, you're just sitting here and I'm beating up on you going, okay, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. No, it's a two-way thing. It has to happen both ways. You both have to have this uniqueness. I feel special when I'm with the person that I love. Chapter 1, she's insecure. Chapter 2, she feels special. Do you feel special in your relationship? Do you look at it and go, I just know that I'm with the right person and I feel special in my relationship? He adores her. She's treasured, cherished, and valued. Is that a statement that can be made? Is that a statement that your significant other can make you about you? Or do they feel used, abused, undervalued, underappreciated? Sometimes they don't even realize that you even exist sometimes. That's the more calculative statement there, and that's what happens more often in relationships. Instead of feeling that you're cherished, treasured, and valued, and adored, you feel the complete opposite of those. Or you feel one at one point and none of the others, and maybe one of the others at another point and none of the others after that. It's very, very hard to really maintain this thing all the time when you're trying to do it on your own. But when you do it the way the Bible tells us to do it, you can start feeling these things. I am a rose, a Sharon, a lily of the valleys. Guys, if you've ever seen valleys back then, you start seeing it and you see how the lilies are in there, they get lost. That's what really the statement comes from this. And there's not a whole lot of guys in here to answer this statement, but you can look at this and you can go, we're horrible at this, is that you'll see a beautiful woman walk by, and you might be even with your significant other, and your eyes will chase that other woman. That's just what happens. We're very visual creatures. And it's almost, instead of treating the person that you're with like that rose or that lily, the one that's walked past has become that. And it becomes very difficult for them to go, oh, see? It's the looks instead of the character that we adore. And what happens? A lot of times she'll feel insecure, but in the Bible it says she feels secure because of the way she was treated. She feels secure. Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest is my beloved among young men. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. Now, really, if your significant other feels this way, and if she was to make the statement, it would be she finds protection from you. There's protection from her skin, and that's really what she's saying. And really, we don't look at it this way, but she's saying, I just want to sit in the shade of him. I just want to sit down in the shade and just pursue this gaze and just kind of have these doe eyes. It doesn't happen often. Our relationships aren't like that. When you hear about this and you start going, well, what's love song? Our relationships don't include this a lot of times. A lot of times, the women we're with, they don't want to delight and sit in your shade. And they're like, get out of the way. What are you doing? You're blocking the sun, dude. And that's where you kind of miss some of these things sometimes. We sit there and go, I delight to sit in his shade. I really just want that protection. I want to feel protected. I want to know that he's going to be there. He's going to take care of it, that I feel valued. And so often, that's not what happens. So often, it's completely opposite of that. So often, it's just kind of lost. In our homes, there's a couple things that we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a protector. We're supposed to be a provider. It's not just about providing financially, because that's not the only. The reality is of this world today, is that both incomes usually are what it takes to make it, especially in this area. So, but really, you're supposed to be a provider of emotional support and really spiritual support, and even financially. But you're also supposed to be there to provide that strength that the household needs a lot of times. And the other thing is that you're supposed to be a pastor in your home. You're supposed to lead. That's what a pastor does. A pastor leads and makes sure that his family stays away from trouble. It stays and guides. And sometimes we're not doing that. Sometimes we're just sitting there and we're too busy playing video games sometimes in order to lead. And sometimes we just get lost and we're going, what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be taking care of this? We don't lead. We follow. We're just going, I'm going to ride the waves like everything else. And it makes it because we end up becoming lost. We get so caught up in work so often. That's what happens a lot, most of the time, is that as guys, I speak from experience. I used to work 12, 14-hour days, and you get so caught up in work that you don't have time when you get home to want to lead. Your job has become where you lead at, and you become a follower at home. And we're called to be the leaders of our home. And she goes, and this is where it kind of gets a little weird. And so I want you to, as you're hearing some of this stuff, don't put your mind in the gutter. You don't have to do that. But it says his fruit is sweet. It's like an apple from the trees. His fruit is sweet. it's a challenging translation. When you read the Bible and you read the translations back to it, it's spiritual. It's not sexual. And so what it really means is it strengthens me with raisins, refresh me with apples. And it's like all it takes is raisins. It's really all I gotta do. Just go get some raisins and strengthen her. And it says, "For I am faint with love. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me." That's verses 5 and 6. Any idea what the raisins represent? Anybody know what raisins are full of? Anytime you bite into a raisin, raisins are full of seeds, and that's what the raisins represent. Is that seeds that and also, in case you didn't know, raisins are an aphrodisiac. So guys, we'll get a bunch of raisins and just keep them all over the house. She wants to give all of herself to him. She wants to, and that's really what she's coming off and saying. I want to give all of myself. I was insecure, but now I feel safe. I feel that and when you start looking at this, and as we're going through this series, and we're really talking about attraction here. What sort of attraction are we pursuing? What are we really pursuing? Because a lot of times, and if you're already in a relationship, that's great. But you still have to make the person that you're with feel that same attraction as the day that you met her, or him, or whatever. You have to feel that. They need to feel that all the time. Because what happens is that they'll go chase it someplace else. We all want to feel that attraction. We want that. Guys included. We want to feel attracted. We want to feel that people want us. And so when we feel that, and we feel it especially from our significant other, and it's like, why would I ever want to go anywhere? Why would I look at anything else? I want that feeling right here. And so when you start hearing this and go, what sort of attraction are we pursuing? What are we looking for? What are we trying to get out of one another? Because a lot of times we're pursuing the wrong things. A lot of times we've taken it and we've gone from pursuing godly character and somebody you can trust to pursuing somebody who looks good, and we'll figure out how to get everything else. I can deal with him, running off every once in a while. I can deal with this because he looks that good. Have you seen, maybe you guys saw a little while ago, some guy that got locked up in Sacramento, and they called him like the hot felon or something like that. And, and he just got locked back up. Everybody was like, he's so hot. We got to chase after. Really? You know where he's going to be at. You just go knock on the door. Hey, can you bring him up to the front room? I'd like to talk to him through this glass for a few minutes. And is that really what we want to pursue? Is that really where looks has chased us? Where we're looking at somebody, oh, that guy's hot, or she's hot, but she's incarcerated. That's not really good. That's not godly character. That's not somebody you can trust. Obviously, but he looks good, or she looks good. You think we've gotten a little lost? Then we've gotten to this point where, and it made like social media storm. It got on the news. It was everywhere. This dude got out and had a modeling gig because of it. It's like, and then still got back and locked up again. What is wrong? You had this, anyway. We have lost what we're supposed to be pursuing. We have lost these relationships that we're after. And really, we've gotten to this point where we've started pursuing looks instead of what really matters and what's going to make our relationships become long-lasting. The attraction should be one of these things that lasts for 58 years. This last week, I met a lady. She joined us for service this last week, and she said, I lost my husband last year. I said, I'm so sorry. How long were you guys married? We were married 58 years. 58 years. As I look around the room, longer than most of you have been alive. 58 years, one person. And, you kind of ask that statement, how do you do it? Because love was always there, and we always pursued God in our relationship. Man, that's amazing. And she goes, without him, I feel lost. There's nothing. I don't want to live life anymore. Anybody in here seen the movie The Notebook? I know all the women in here have seen the movie The Notebook. If you've seen the movie The Notebook, remember what happens is that at the end, when she passes, he dies as well because he didn't want to live without her. That's where our life is supposed to get to. We're not supposed to go and go, oh, God, he died. I got to go kill myself. And that's not what the point. But, we should want to be, our relationships are supposed to be death to us depart, and the reality is that it's gotten too consistent for our relationships to end in divorce. It just happens. It's so often that you hear about relationships, this one's over and that one's over. I was watching, some movie, and they talked about how one of the stars of the movie had been divorced already 6 times, and I go, 6 times? Holy cow. Sometimes it's just too common now that it just ends up over like that because we pursue the wrong traits. We've been attracted to the wrong traits for too long. We need to start pursuing godly character and allow everything else to fall into place. The trust will be built, and if you get this godly character, God will make you look good. That's just how it is. A little small shift in what we've been doing. A little small shift in how we chase one another, and a little small shift in how we do life with one another. And all of a sudden, you'll start finding that our marriages start lasting longer. Our relationships will start being built on a healthy foundation. And love is really part of the house that we've built. And God is part of the house that we built, instead of looks. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much. So often this book of the Bible is overlooked and it's skipped past, and God, we are so thankful that it's in there because it shows us how Christ really set this example for loving the church, but also you've given us this real world example of how a husband and wife should love one another. God, we're so thankful for what you're doing and the changes that you've already started to make in this church today. Through each one of our services, you can see how people are going to start treating their relationships different, how they're going to start loving each other differently, how they're going to start appreciating one another differently. It's amazing on what an hour's message and an hour's worth of time in the book, your word can make a difference in our lives. God, we're so thankful for just bringing each one of us here. We're thankful for the breath that you breathed, this life that you breathed into each one of us, so that way we can walk out of here and go, today will be different. I'll start treating my spouse differently today. I'm not going to wait. I don't need to put something else in place. I can do it right now. And we're thankful for that opportunity. Now we ask for the strength that even while we're giving all that and we're putting all this in, and if our significant other isn't doing it right now, that we can persevere. We can continue to do it without looking and growing animosity, and we can just continue to love and help grow those relationships. Father, thank you again for all that you are doing here today. It's in your Son, Jesus' name we pray.